Hey everyone, welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. We are in Revelation 18 tonight. I'm Doug. That guy over there is Scott. We are going to go through this chapter. We got through part of it last week, and we've been having an incredible time in the book of Revelation. Now, if you have been with us for a long time, or if you're completely new to Prophecy Roundtable, welcome. You can spend a lifetime in Revelation and keep discovering new things. Every time I go through it, I discover something new. Now, what Scott and I have been trying to do over many years is to let go of some of the old paradigms that we grew up with. Not that all the old paradigms are wrong necessarily, but sometimes we need to step back, we need to reconsider, and we have to take a fresh look at Scripture. And so that's what we are trying to do here. We always welcome your questions, so please go ahead and put those in the chat. And Scott, why don't we just jump right in? Because I think there is so much fun stuff to get to. So we're going to go back a little bit where we were last week, and then we will move forward. And the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. They will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, "Alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city, Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come." And the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple cloth, silk, scarlet cloth, all kinds of scented wood, all kinds of articles of ivory, all kinds of articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle, and sheep, horses and chariots and slaves, that is, human souls. Wow. All right. So, I think as people have attempted over the many years to try to, kind of figure out who this is exactly, some people have said New York City. It has to be New York City because, you'd only find such abundance in a place like New York, for example, or it has to be someplace really close to the coast. And I think part of it, and, last week you and I were just kind of going back and forth, trying to, figure out who this might be. And it does beg the question, is this talking about a literal city, or is this talking about a system? Is it figurative here? How much do we lean into, the particulars of it? Is it Rome? Is it New York City? You have suggested Jerusalem. I happen to think it might be a rebuilt city of Babylon. And let me just explore that just for a second. First of all, I want to say, if I'm totally wrong about that, I don't think that my entire eschatology crumbles. That would just be one aspect of my theory that may be wrong. But I think, in my experience, when I have encountered people who are trying to pin the tail on who is Babylon, it often comes down to this urgency that everything has to be fulfilled in the next 1 to 2 or 3 years. And especially when I was a pre-tribber, I mean, it could happen at any second. So, man, it's got to be right today. It's got to happen. And if we can't find something on the map today, then, well, then people are kind of in a tizzy. And so they're trying to find a current day. I tend to think that a rebuilt city of Babylon is not too extreme. Now, again, I could be totally wrong about that, so I'm not going to die on that hill. But just to make a case for it, what I would suggest is, we do know that Nimrod was the first who built Babylon, right? The book of Genesis tells us that. That is where this place called the Gate of the Gods, Bab-el, that's where it all started. We also saw that the beast is going to be of this group called the Seven, but he himself will be the eighth, which suggests that he may have been the first one, especially as I'm understanding it, that he was the originator of the old Babylonian kingdom. And this city right now obviously doesn't exist. Okay, you can go to Iraq, you can go to the remains of what they understand to be the city of Babylon. You can see the most likely site for where the Tower of Babel actually stood. It's all very fascinating. And there's nothing there. All right. And you say, well, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, there's nothing here, Doug. How could you imagine? But see, I don't think it all has to happen in the next 3 or 4 years. I think if we take a longer runway, that this could very much happen. And I think as I have been exploring history, we have seen power centers shift quite radically. Before World War II, the financial center of the world was London, not New York City. But because of World War II, because Britain and its vast empire found themselves in the midst of a fight for survival, they had to keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing from the United States. And until after World War II, everything flipped, and the pound was no longer the reserve currency of the world, but it became the dollar. This all happened at the Bretton Woods, and almost overnight, so to speak. Overnight in the grand scheme of things, it all shifted, and the power was now in Washington and New York City and all these other places. I think it's entirely plausible that we could also experience some kind of systemic shock. I mean, I've been watching all these videos about how, the Chinese have so much of our debt, the Europeans have a lot of our debt. We don't even know where all of our debt is. I mean, it's more complex than that. But that the idea that the dollar could fail is not fantasy. There's lots of people who have been talking about this for a very long time. And, we keep kicking the can down the road. One day it feels like that can is going to kick us back. Okay. So if we had some kind of cataclysmic event, could be nuclear, could be financial Armageddon, it could be all kinds of different things that really could sink the dollar. Then imagine somebody who is mega rich. He's got hundreds of billions, maybe even trillions. I mean, Elon Musk is, at least on paper, he's worth more than $500 billion. That's insane to think about that. And I have other opinions about that, which I will not share right at the moment. But I think it's very plausible that somebody called the Beast or whatever he's called could rise up and could essentially have so much money that he could go into Iraq, which is very depressed. Their economy is in shambles. And if he went in there and just started giving money here and money there for all these potential projects, he doesn't outright buy the country, but he practically buys the country. He practically owns it because he owns this plot here and this plot there, and he's got this venture going on over there. And within the period of 10, 20, maybe 30 years, we could radically see a different economy of scale rise up in a different place. Now, the Babylonian system, I want to make this really clear. The Babylonian system is already in place, okay? It's kind of like when I take my computer and, I often go to Panera and I get my coffee there. I just took my whole office with me. My whole infrastructure is with me, okay? So the world has changed so much that we are not as landlocked as we used to be. We're not in just one place. It doesn't have to be New York City with the wall, the Wall Street and all that kind of stuff. We could now have these virtually or, at least symbolically in other places. So again, I'm not going to die on this hill, but I do think a rebuilt Babylon is at least a plausible option. That it may become a figurehead. It may be sort of the Disneyland of the world of the future, where it's all smoke and mirrors, sure, but still it has kind of this figurehead sense of this is now our capital, and its destruction does not necessarily destroy the whole Babylonian system, but it certainly becomes a focal point where humanity could look at it. And so when I look at Revelation 18, I think we're hard pressed to say that it's only a system. It's only an idea. It's only a religious concept. I mean, it really sounds like there's kind of boots on the ground on this thing. So I'd love to hear how you see that, Scott.
Yeah. Again, I sort of look like you mentioned earlier about, is this a system? Is it symbolic, or is it a literal city? And yes, I believe it is systematic. It's a global system, just like, and it does go back to ancient Babylon, to the Tower of Babel, in which all the nations spoke one language. I mean, the linguistic experts now have pretty much determined that they can trace back all languages to a single language. And then you have all the cultures that have, they all have the flood story. And you have a lot of similarities between the true faith, and a lot of the false faith and the false gods and everything. You have a Trinity story in a lot of these pagan type things. So you see all this tracing back to Babel. And so I do believe, I agree with Doug, it goes back to ancient Babylon. That's the mother and the father of mystery religions, in other words. And I do believe that makes a full circle, in which, I believe with AI, with the ability to control currency, with the ability, Starlink and Neuralink. I mean, you 30 years ago, I mean, it might have been considered science fiction. There may have been a few prophecy writers that were starting to make this connection. Chuck Missler being one of the first, I believe, that really started looking into transhumanism and being linked up to the net and being immortal. So I do see all this coming back. And when you were talking, I've thought about this recently, and it's based on the verse in Daniel, actually, in which this little horn. I like to use the biblical language instead of antichrist for everything. But the little horn, it appears he's going to build some palaces between Jerusalem and the sea. And you've got this big parking lot right now that the nation state of Israel is turning into this strip of land that used to be their ancient nemesis, the Philistines. And so it could be that the base, instead of it being necessarily, I still believe the enemy wants to stake his claim to Jerusalem. So in that respect, there's just so much evidence pointing to an end times Jerusalem. As you pointed out right now, if I were looking at history and going, okay, what fits this bill over the past 1600 years as far as an entity that has killed and murdered thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of saints because they would not abide by her rules, and they burned people at the stake. And if you did not, you were deemed a heretic. That would be the Roman Catholic Church. It would also be some of her daughters. The Church of England, the Pope, the King is what used to be. Now he's the defender of all faiths, not the defender of the faith, but the King of England, the Queen of England, killed people because they didn't get on board with the Church of England. And so you see that there have been throughout since Yeshua returned to his place, after the initial persecution by the Jews, it really then flipped the script once the church became this Gentile Christian church that wanted nothing to do with the Jews. So she fits the bill. And as you pointed out, New York City right now used to be London. Now the economic center fits New York City. So the people that argue for New York City, they can make a good case. The people that argue for the Vatican, they make a good case. The people that argue for Jerusalem, based on, somebody put up here earlier about the parallel between Matthew 23:35, Revelation 18:24. Matthew 23 is the righteous blood is upon the scribes and the Pharisees. In Revelation, the blood guilt falls on Babylon. And there's no doubt, I mean, we have the example of Stephen, being killed. And there's no doubt that initially it was those in the synagogues, it was the Pharisees, it was the Sadducees that were most hostile to the way, to the faith that Peter was proclaiming, that Paul was proclaiming. But again, that shifted. There's not been too much persecution by the house of Judah toward the Christians in the past 1950 years, probably. I mean, I don't know when that ceased, but at some point in time, they were such a minority that it's really been the Christian church, the Roman church, that's taken over that rule. And I do believe that the Vatican and Christianity has its sticky fingers in Jerusalem just as much as Islam has now made a claim to it, as well as Judaism. So that's what I'm looking at. So you have all of these religions, two of which have some truth. Even Islam has a little bit of truth. It's got a bunch more lies mixed in, but you do have these two faiths that they don't teach the truth and nothing but the truth. Both add to, both take away. And so again, that's my argument for Jerusalem. But I do see, Doug, to your point, I can see where it could even be this final, 15-minute city is built in Gaza, in which that is where the little horn establishes his base of operations. And on the economic side, you mentioned about how it
Well,
shifted.
why Gaza? Why not just Babylon? I mean, why not
Well,
just go
because
with what it
I don't
says?
see that. That's where that's where we just differ. I think Satan has his
Yeah.
eyes on the land.
Well,
So
I'm not disagreeing that he has evil intentions for Jerusalem and that he's going to definitely put his feet there and he's going to go into the temple and declare himself to be God. I mean, yes, I mean, clearly he's going to have a massive footprint there. But I just feel like the simplest thing is just to say that Babylon is Babylon,
yeah,
why? But because now you're saying that it could potentially be Gaza. Like, how does that solve any problems? I don't get it.
I'm not. Again, I think it's going to be end time Jerusalem. I think that is going to be the religious capital. That is going to be the economic capital. That is going to be, in other words, everything is going to migrate from, as you just pointed out.
Yeah.
I believe America. It's whenever they want to pull the rug out from the currency and do the reset.
Yeah.
I mean, it could happen tomorrow because, again, we're talking about play money. It's fiat money. When we went on the central bank system back in 1913, 1914. I mean, essentially, we're borrowing money from a bunch of rich people who loan us money. That's what a central bank is. It is not owned by America. It's owned by a few select families. And I believe that the Vatican has done a wonderful job hiding behind the Jewish families that are the main bankers here. In other words, she does a wonderful job hiding behind, and then in that way, right? I mean, you know it right now, Doug. Who's getting all the blame for everything? I mean, and again, some of it well deserved. When you start looking at the leaders of the CDC, you start looking at some of the Hollywood moguls, you start looking at certain things. It's a disproportionate number of people who probably don't practice the Jewish faith whatsoever, but they're Jewish by birth only. In other words, they're not Orthodox Jews. No Orthodox Jew would they would probably be aghast if Zuckerberg walked into a synagogue. So again, you do see this.
I guess so. Bring it around for me. What is it you're saying about the
I'm
Jewish
saying
people?
that behind the facade is probably Rome. In other words, at the upper echelon of this mystery religion, those initiated into it at the top of Roman Catholicism, at the top of Islam, at the top of mystical Judaism, Kabbalah, in other words, satanic Judaism, they all know the God they serve.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're in agreement that there's a lot of nefarious characters out there
by all religions, not just Jews.
Yeah. But when we look at this chapter and when it talks about, these very literal items that are found in this city, the language does seem to be a very specific place.
I agree.
With a specific destruction.
I agree.
So
it fits Jerusalem to a T.
You think it's Jerusalem? Is that what you're saying?
Look at the elements again. I know you differ with Chris White, but he makes a great case and breaks down each and every one of those. The myrrh, the frankincense. I mean, just read through the Torah. You're going to see sheep. You're going to see these things.
Yeah.
And you're going to see where King Solomon violated the Torah and built up his horses. So you're going to see all these elements, and you can link each and every one of them back to Jerusalem.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to get into, the debate like we had before where, I mean, we clearly see very differently on this one.
Definitely.
But so you think that the destruction of Jerusalem is the fulfillment of Revelation 18?
Again, New Jerusalem coming down and replacing it.
Well, again, we agree that modern day Jerusalem, current Jerusalem, is going to be decimated. There's no question about that. I guess I just see very different intent behind the destruction of Babylon versus the destruction of Jerusalem. right? Jerusalem is going to be destroyed because all the nations are coming against it. And then God is coming to save Jerusalem, at least its people, not its infrastructure. Whereas Babylon, God is pretty happy when it goes down, and he tells everybody to rejoice because Babylon is getting trashed.
And
That's
I'm
what I
not
keep,
dogmatic on
coming
this.
back to this, and I just can't
Yeah,
understand.
I
I mean,
understand.
I sort of understand, yeah, okay, that Satan's going to be doing nefarious stuff in Jerusalem. I get that, but that's nothing that heaven is rejoicing about. I mean, it says that God is not going to rest until he makes Jerusalem a joy in the whole earth, right?
I agree. The New Jerusalem. We
Yeah,
agree.
I know, but you keep calling Jerusalem Babylon. Like that's where
Well,
I get
because
that's where I
right
get
now,
hung up, and I just don't know how to. I don't know how to resolve that.
read,
It doesn't make
read
any sense.
Ezekiel 16 and get back to me.
No, I of course I read that, bro.
I mean, but
I
that's
read
what
the
I'm
book of Galatians too while we're at it. Okay, just so you know.
saying. I'm teasing you.
I know, but so I mean, let's go. So let's go back to the text because that's what I'm trying to understand. When the you mighty city Babylon, and that's got all this different stuff. And let's go on here with our list. The fruit for which your soul longed has gone from you, and all your delicacies and your splendors are lost to you, never to be found again. The merchants of these wares who gained wealth from her will stand far off and fear of her torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas, for the great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels, and with pearls. For in a single hour all this wealth has been laid waste, and all shipmasters and seafaring men, sailors, and all whose trade is on the sea, stood far off and cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning. What city was like the great city? Okay, and they threw dust on their heads and they wept and mourned and crying out, alas, alas, for the great city, where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth, for in a single hour she has been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, so will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence and will be found no more.
Mm-hmm.
And the sound of harpists and musicians, of flute players and trumpeters will be heard in you no more, and craftsmen of any craft will be found in you no more, and the sound of the mill will be heard in you no more, and the light of the lamp will shine in you no more, and the voice of a bridegroom and bride will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who have been slain on earth.
Yeah, you got a hard case to make there for a new rebuilt Babylon, seeing as how none of the prophets. Let me finish. None of the prophets, none of the saints have been slain in this non-existent currently city. You've got a major issue there.
Okay, all right. So I have a major issue, but you're saying that this is all applying to Jerusalem,
Not dogmatically.
but that's where you keep ending up, right?
No, that is my current understanding, because
Yeah.
again, Jerusalem as we know it right now, and as I believe it will become at the end of the age, will cease to exist. There is going to be a new Jerusalem. That's where I used to think you were cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs for teaching that New Jerusalem came down at the beginning of the millennium. And again, this perfectly explains how the current harlot city with the three major, well, two harlot religions, one never was in covenant, Islam, but she claims to be a monotheistic religion. But at the same point in time, I believe current Jerusalem, just when we look at and I didn't write down all the scriptures and everything, but when we look at what happens and the topography and everything changing, and especially if you're correct, and my current understanding is correct, that New Jerusalem comes down, that's where the Torah is going to be going forth from the New Jerusalem, not from current Jerusalem or end of the age Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
So again, right now, does Jerusalem fit that bill? No, New York City fits more the economic bill right now, or London, or Paris for that matter, the major economic centers of the world. Right now, the Vatican fits the religious aspect of it. Who's
Uh-huh.
killed the most actual followers of Yeshua in the past 1700 years?
Well, yeah, I
It's
mean,
Rome.
if we're only taking that criterion, but of course, there's
We have to take
no
all of them.
commerce to speak of that's happening in the Vatican. Let's be specific about the Vatican, not just Rome, right?
Well, I'm talking about Roman Catholicism. I mean, she
Okay.
has not changed. She has not
Yeah.
repented. She has not changed her doctrine. It's almost like Islam, Doug. You know how Islam they're but it's actually in the Quran that where they can, make peace when they're in the minority. They can, and we see that we see that happening in Europe right now, where they come in and they're peaceful, and then they start to overtake, and then they start to enforce Sharia law. Rome sort of lost her military might to a certain extent, or at least she went dormant for a while, but she has not changed. She considers, by her doctrine, I'm not talking about the little lady down the street or even the Catholic priest, but if they follow Roman doctrine, you and I are going to burn in hell. We are going, because we are not part of the universal Holy Roman Catholic Church. She has not changed her doctrine. She paints a picture of this ecumenical thing, but again, she still wants everybody up under her. And I believe that she will be used for this final universal Catholic global religion, in which the mask is going to come off, and those at the upper echelon, those that are actually initiated into the mystery school and the religion about who they really worship, when you look into the symbolism, I mean, you can't like look at the Pope's funny fish Dagon hat, and he's got the hexagram, and he's got the sunburst, and even the Eucharist, the wafer is a symbol of the sun. You've got all this imagery that goes
Yeah.
all the way back to Babylon. To your point,
Yeah.
nothing new under the sun.
But then you apply it to Jerusalem. I guess that's where I keep having
Because Rome is all up in bed in Jerusalem. I've had to pay money to pee in the Catholic toilets in Capernaum. I've had to pay money to pee in their
Well,
in their
okay,
bathrooms.
but peeing, having to
They
pay.
own much of Jerusalem, Doug.
Yeah,
Do
I
the
know that.
research.
Yes, I know they've been there for a very long time. There's no question about that.
And
But
I would say, and again, JT makes a good point. I believe it ultimately gets centered in Jerusalem, but Mystery Babylon is global, whether it be her religions or her economic systems, entertainment systems, financial systems, culture, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, you've got this. You see it in the Beast, where essentially Babylon is eaten up by Medo-Persia, Medo-Persia by Greece, Greece by Rome, and Rome never went away. She just morphed. I mean, she just never went away. DC might as well be built upon ancient Roman pagan, going all the way back to Babylon. You've got the obelisk, you've got all this imagery. Same thing with the Vatican. You've got the big old phallus in the middle of the Vatican with the sunburst. It's all there. It's been staring at people in plain sight.
yeah, but so then or JT, whoever this is, says this worldwide Jerusalem system. I don't know. I guess
Yeah,
I have issue with that. That I
she's
don't
the
think there's
mother.
a Jerusalem system. There's a Babylonian system. Yes.
She's the mother.
Yeah. And she has, lots of headquarters around the world. The Babylonian system is clearly from Babylon, obviously.
But you
But
can't go back in.
the city in question in Revelation 18.
Pull up Ezekiel 23 and see what's called the mother of harlots. I'm not making this up. We've agreed that scripture in Revelation, he's not making up anything new. In other words, he's quoting the prophets. He's alluding to the prophets.
Sure.
He's not just inventing things. That's 23 where you got two women, but 16 is is directed specifically at Jerusalem.
Okay. Right. So Jerusalem has abominations, no doubt about that. Okay. And God took her and he loved her.
Mm-hmm.
And you went forth among the nations because of your beauty, for it was perfect in the splendor. Right. So this is happening just before the destruction of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar.
The first time. Yep. So again,
Okay.
you just see all the imagery, but again,
Yeah.
she's got sons and daughters.
Okay.
So
But
again, this is
Jerusalem
the
for the last
mother of all
2,000-ish
harlots.
years, yeah. But for the last 2,000-ish years, she really hasn't been on the world stage at all.
She birthed Judaism. She birthed Christianity.
Okay.
She birthed the two sisters. I mean, again, it's we can't just look at. I mean, Christianity is the house of Israel. I mean, it fits the house of Israel and the sins of Jeroboam like a glove, as
Mhm.
you and I agree. And again, Judaism, she got exiled to Babylon, and she brought a lot of Babylon back with her. I mean, you know, the honest Jewish scholars will admit that the hexagram, which is an occult symbol, has nothing to do with the shield of David, and yet you have her and her religions using that occultic six-pointed symbol now as there. I mean, it's like idols everywhere. I just can't help but see idols and occult symbolism. I mean, I don't have any crosses either. By the way, I don't believe that we should have crosses as symbols. So I'm
I
not
know
I'm
you
not just beating up on
yeah,
Sister Judah. I'm also beating up on Sister Samaria.
yeah. So somebody asked, Karen asked, "What about Revelation 11:8, where it says the great city where the Lord was crucified?" That would be Jerusalem. Well, obviously, where the Jesus was crucified was definitely in Jerusalem,
Pull,
and it
pull up.
certainly was a great city, no doubt about that. But Babylon was a great city. What I see is I see that there are two competing, let's call them women in the Bible. You have
Hey
Jerusalem, who's
everyone,
supposed to
welcome to
be
the Prophecy Roundtable.
who's supposed to be married to God and clearly was not faithful. And then you have Babylon that should never have existed in the first place. So I just think we're misidentifying this. Again, I'm
Well,
the first to admit Jerusalem screwed up big time,
it's
but it
again.
doesn't make her Babylon. There's just a big difference.
Well, again, but to her point, it says, Revelation 11:8.
Hmm.
The same author is using the same words about the two witnesses. They will lie on the street of the great city. You agree that's Jerusalem.
Sure.
Uh, the great city was split into three parts, and the cities Babylon the Great was remembered. I believe Jerusalem is going to get split up. I mean, we already see sort of. At least we know where it's going to go in half. We know where half of it's going to go from the Mount of Olives.
Yeah.
But so again, it's. I don't see any evidence. If we're going to look at it literally, which I think this is where we maybe have a different hermeneutic. And you've already admitted that the ancient Babylon, that's not been around for 2,500 plus years, hadn't killed any prophets or saints. I mean, the system of Babylon has the
Yeah.
religion system. So
Yeah.
again, in that respect, you have to go. Well, yes, this is more systematic. This is
Sure.
more
Yeah.
symbolic of religions and of finances and things of that nature. And
Yeah.
again, this is by no means, like you said, you're not going to die on the hill that it's a rebuilt by golly Babylon in ancient Babylon. I'm not dying on this hill either. I'm not staking, you know, a kingdom status on this. I'm not, as far as I think it's how we differ. And I think we've been doing a good job, especially since it's just been the two of us and we haven't had any people that just make me go, it's easier when you're friends with somebody. So,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Hmm.
pull back up 18 again, or 17 where we were. Let's but again, what evidence I would have a question for you as far as Revelation 17, as far as have you done the research into ancient Babylon and whether or not frankincense and myrrh and sheep and I mean is what, because again, I do believe Chris White laid out a great case and proved that all those elements apply to the tabernacle, the temple, things of that nature. So I'm just wondering if you've done any, because you do love to do research. Have you looked to see if any of these
Yeah.
elements about as far as purple and silk and scarlet? I mean, again, our brothers and sisters that believe this is the Vatican and believe this is Rome, they can make a pretty strong case based on certain aspects of this.
Sure. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
don't see, like, for instance, where that falls flat on its face, in my opinion, is cattle and sheep. Rome does not, they generally don't have a bunch of cattle and sheep that they're sacrificing. They're not guilty of doing animal sacrifices, at least publicly.
Well, no one said it had to be sacrifices per se.
Well,
Just
but
these are the things that the merchants are bringing because this is their cargo. I mean, people did use cattle and sheep for many things other than
oh, I know,
religious sacrifices, and they used horses and chariots. I mean, that was your basic
transportation and war.
transportation. Cattle and sheep are your clothing, your food to some degree, your milk and cheese. I mean, fine flour, oil. I don't think that these are necessarily unique to Jerusalem. I think these are things that you would find in any major metropolis in the ancient world. I really don't think these are specific to Jerusalem.
Well, I'm just talking about like the elements. And again, I didn't go back and read Chris's. I didn't listen to these videos in preparation for this. I didn't go back and read his book that I have, but he does make. I don't think you can poke holes in his argument as far as he goes through each and every element to show how that is linked to either the temple, the tabernacle, and this is where I know we can agree, and how Judah, Israel as a whole, perverted this. In other words, so much so, like, Yah is saying, I hate your sacrifices.
Mm-hmm.
Not because they were actually ticking the boxes and doing it correctly. It's because there was no repentance, or they were mixing in the pagan ways along with their worship of him. In other words, he's not angry at anybody that with a repentant heart and that's offering sacrifices. It's sort of like the Roman Catholic version of, I'm cheating on my wife. I go confess to the priest, I'm cheating on my wife. He says, say some Hail Marys, and I'm not repentant at all. I plan on going out the next day and sinning again.
Mm-hmm.
There's no heart change. And that's what Israel was guilty of. They were just going through the motions, thinking that the motions and ticking their sacrifice boxes would somehow cover or atone or have forgiveness for their sins. Not to mention, there was never any forgiveness for an intentional sin under the Levitical system.
Yeah. So JT says, interesting, John can't even bring himself to call it Jerusalem. He does everything to avoid calling the city Jerusalem, where the Lord was crucified, Sodom and Egypt. So, that would strengthen my perspective that Jerusalem was called a lot of things, Sodom, Egypt. Not exactly flattery right there, right? I mean, those are pretty big insults. Sodom, obviously, received the Lord's wrath, okay? So, again, I'm not arguing that Jerusalem doesn't deserve the Lord's wrath, but it's never called Babylon in Scripture. It is called Sodom, which was terrible, and Egypt, but it wasn't. I just keep seeing the word Babylon, and I'm just like, when did Jerusalem become Babylon? Like, I think that's where we have to.
I think she's
certainly agree to disagree. So, when in a single hour, how would you what is it that you see happening here?
I think judgment falls judgment begins at the house of God. And so, this is going to be at the very, very end of the age, and again, that's where it can be both ends. So is Jerusalem, the people of Jerusalem, saved or judged? And it's yes. I mean, if we look at Zechariah, 2/3 aren't going to fare very well. And then you're going to have those that they're going to get the memo at the very last moment, and he will save Judah. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to save the sewer systems or
sure.
He's not going to I don't think some believe. Like to I'm gonna have to discuss it with Melissa when we get to this part where we're going through Isaiah, but she believes that the third temple it will actually be used in the millennium as opposed to a brand new temple being rebuilt. She seems to have an understanding that we're going to have to cleanse the temple. I personally believe he's taking a wrecking ball to anything and everything to do with religion, economics, everything that he's not building any type of foundation in the millennium on this current age or understandings. I believe that if there is a temple built, it's coming down.
I agree with you. And again, I don't think that any of the current infrastructure of Jerusalem is going to remain. I think it's all going to be leveled. So we're totally in agreement that there'll be nothing but rubble left, and he will have to, do a whole brand new thing. So here's a question from Danita. Then we can understand how the ruins remain. Is that the one? Oh, and she says, I always thought that the New Jerusalem came down at the end of the millennium. So yeah,
I used to,
Danita, that is the predominant position for most eschatologists. I was looking, this is probably 12, 13, 14 years ago. Time flies, huh? And I just kept thinking about it because what happens in my experience is most Christian eschatologists look at Revelation and they say, well, there you go. You got Revelation 20, then you got 21, and they all just come in sequence. But when you look at things like Isaiah 65 and 66, it talks about the new heavens and the new earth coming early, and that there will still be the potential for death. There will be the potential to have children, and that people will be building houses and all kinds of stuff. It's all millennial language that is being spoken of. Paul in Romans chapter 8, he talks about how creation is groaning, waiting to be released from this bondage of corruption into glorious light of the sons of God. So when we get our new bodies, Paul is saying that the earth itself will get its new creative essence. All right. And then you just have to look at some kind of practical stuff. Like the world's going to get seriously trashed, and Scott and I are very much in agreement that Babylon, wherever that is, and Jerusalem, wherever that is, are going to be decimated. All right. And so it says in Isaiah chapter 2 that all the towers of the world are going to fall. All the mighty mountains are going to be, done in. And there's going to be, the oceans are turned to blood. I mean, it's going to be a complete mess. So the earth is not a very nice place to live. And what a lot of prophecy teachers have done is they said, well, there's going to be kind of this intermediary state where Jesus is going to do, serious remodeling on planet Earth. And then afterward, then he's going to make the new heavens and the new earth. But I just don't think that that lines up with all of Scripture. There are passages in Ezekiel, there are passages in Zechariah that give the same language that you see in Revelation, but in the context of the millennium. For example, in Ezekiel 47, it talks about the river that has the trees of life on either side of it, whose trees are medicine. Revelation 22, it says that these trees are for the healing of the nations. I mean, that right there, healing of the nations. Well, if we're in the eternal state in Revelation 22, who needs any healing? We're already all good to go, right? And then it says in Revelation 22:14, it says, outside of the city are dogs and sorcerers and liars and all who love and practice
yeah,
and all that
yeah.
stuff. So there's people outside the New Jerusalem who are not the greatest of people versus the people inside the New Jerusalem.
And they haven't, and they obviously have not been cast into the lake of fire yet,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is the second death.
Yeah.
So this is it's on topic, but this is about? He's referring to Daniel 8. If the third temple is the little horn taking a wrecking ball in heaven, and part of the heavenly temple descends to earth, the phrase regular sacrifice in Daniel only says daily originally. And so again, it's that Daniel 8 has always intrigued me because it does have this entity, like it's almost like in the heavenlies that this is occurring.
Yeah.
And because it says it happens at the end of the age, and as you said, prophecy geeks, prophecy dorks, prophecy scholars, whatever we want to call them, and or us. I don't write books, but I have been reading books of scholars and studying things like Daniel 8, and that just has never. It's like everybody's trying to pigeonhole that prophecy. Oh, where'd Doug go?
No.
Pigeonhole that prophecy here on Earth at the very end of this age, as opposed to what the text actually says. And maybe when Doug and I get through Revelation, Daniel might be a good book for us to
Yeah.
start on
Oh
next.
yeah. There's
So,
great stuff in Daniel. I mean, it's a really exciting book for sure.
and then you'll see the fireworks fly when we get to Daniel 9.
You think I wrote a paper about that already? So
I'm
I'm ready.
ready. I'm coming with both barrels. So,
Well, I did my homework anyway. So, for by your sorceries were all the nations deceived, could you explain the Greek word sorcery, which is pharmakia, and discuss how it relates to medical treatments? So, I've got to say, I think there's a lot of prophecy teachers who've kind of latched onto this word pharmakia, and therefore anything that to do with any kind of drugs whatsoever, therefore it must be sorcery. I think it's very shallow. It's very one dimensional. There clearly have been substances, and there still are many substances that can be mind altering kinds of things, and I think that is what it's getting at. But it's not against your high blood pressure medicine. It's not against your diabetes, insulin. It's not against those things, and we use a blanket term pharmakia because languages evolve over time, and we could go down a whole interesting memory lane of words that have radically shifted. One you may have heard of is gay. Okay, it used to mean happy. It clearly has a different meaning
and
nowadays.
and fag used to mean a cigarette.
Yeah, and nice
Yeah.
used to mean silly, but we don't use it that way anymore. So we have to be careful to not take our modern understanding and retroactively apply it. That's anachronistic to do
Well,
that. So
and I
we've got to be
was
careful to not do that.
and I would say within the ancient mystery religion, certainly, and even now, drugs are used to open up that portal into
Yeah,
another dimension.
yeah.
And I was a wild and crazy kid. I mean, it's nothing. I did psychedelics like mushrooms. Don't ever go pick mushrooms off a cow patty and eat it. You might find yourself on a trip, but again, I never wanted to get the least bit introspective or anything. Not saying I didn't open up gates or portals, but when you start talking about the psychedelics and again the
Yeah.
psychotropic drugs that are
Hmm.
overprescribed to people,
Hmm. Hmm.
that yes, when something bad happens, like when a person goes through a bankruptcy, they're going to be sad. When a person goes through a divorce, when a person loses a parent or loses a child, God forbid, it's natural to have that mourning period and be very very sad. And too often our medical industry right now, there's a pill for that, and you don't get to necessarily overcome and work through that. There's a time for mourning. And so
Hmm.
yeah, I would say no doubt certain medications would fit this bill.
Hmm.
I know I have a very good friend. She joined us. She is against all forms of medicine. I am not. I mean, I will take an aspirin if my back hurts. If I like when I go trout fishing, I know from standing in the river and having back surgery and everything, my back is going to hurt. So I'll pre-take some aspirin. I'll pre-take some ibuprofen. I will preemptively get ahead of the pain that I know is coming because I can hardly move if I don't, you know.
Right. Yeah. And
So
so scripture is not against those kinds of uses that they had medicinal substances back then. So I
and,
guess I
and Paul even
encourage
says
people.
Paul encourages Timothy to take a little bit of wine for a stomach, and
There you
and
go.
I do believe that Yah created, like for instance, opium. It has a benefit to help someone in extreme pain
Hmm.
to comfort that pain, and it can be abused. It can certainly
Yeah.
be pharmakia. The same
Right.
thing,
Yeah.
certain like marijuana can be used beneficially, or it can be used to get high as a kite. There's certain natural substances, and again, where I will agree, what happened in the 20s and the 30s, you can't patent a plant. You cannot patent nature, and so a
Mm.
lot of our pharmaceuticals now they're nothing more than they've taken the compounds that are in Yah's creation and they've tweaked them a bit, because then you can patent it, then you can market it, then you can sell it, and then you can make a lot of money off of it. And so that is no doubt the Babylonian economic system. And so, they outlawed hemp in America because the hemp plant is excellent for paper. Well, who owned most of the pine plantations? The wealthy did. You know,
Mm.
so it's a lot easier to grow hemp than it is pine trees. But it's actually you can make clothing out of hemp. It's very strong and sturdy. So, but again, because of the pharmaceutical industry, the oil industry, the petroleum based, you have all these products that if you look at it when they were outlawed in the 20s and the 30s, and it goes back to money, it goes back to
Mm-hmm.
the Rockefellers. It
Follow
goes
the money.
so
Nothing new
yeah,
there.
yeah. Danita, you beat me to
And
it.
I
All
think if
about
we were
the
to,
money.
I think if we were to summarize Revelation 18, it's basically follow the money, right? I don't think that all those things that the market, the merchants are bringing, I don't think that they're that specific or that special even. But I think it's basically saying all of this merchandising, all of commercialism, which very much is in line with the Babylonian system, wherever that city may be. We can figure that out someday. But it's this economic system with all of its all of its traps. This is going to come down. It's definitely going to come down wherever it's located. If it's New York City or Babylon or Jerusalem or wherever, it's going to come down.
Isaac, and again, Isaac, I could make a very strong case just for Rome and the Vatican, because again, I do believe she is behind the bankers. In other words, now I'm interviewing tomorrow, by the way, myself and Jaron from AOC Network. He's joined us before. We're actually going to interview Tim Cohen. So it's not going to be, I'm not going to it's not going to be a discussion. I'm going to ask him some hard questions, but I'm going to let Tim talk. And if you've ever listened to Tim, he can talk. So y'all join us tomorrow night for a special Shabbat. But his theory is behind the Vatican, at least currently, is really King Chucky. But what I'm seeing right now is the beast comes from the sea and the nations, of which no doubt Britain and where the 10 tribes of Israel were scattered, and the false prophet comes from the land. So I used to look at perhaps the Pope being the false prophet, but I do believe perhaps the false prophet is really going to be more from Judah, pointing to a false Messiah, a beast that's going to come from the 10 tribes, perhaps even the tribe of Dan, who will judge his brothers. And then when you start, again, Tim makes a great case. And when you realize that the House of Windsor ain't English, he makes an interesting case, even though I don't even like to play pin the tail on the Antichrist, or what color underwear does the beast wear. So yeah, it'll be on my YouTube channel and Facebook stuff, and then Jaron will probably put it out on his channel later. So
yeah. Well, just to summarize, we didn't come to any agreement on where this is, but we are very much in agreement that it's going down. It definitely includes this greater Babylonian system that has been around since the days of Nimrod. God is wrathful against that, not because he doesn't like t-shirts and houses and buildings, and he's against stuff that we need to live, or even aspirin or whatever it may be, right? It's God is against things that hold us in bondage, that enslave us, that steal our minds, steal our lives. One of the things that was mentioned in there is, in this city there are the souls of men. So there's people who are being forced into prostitution, people who are being forced into modern day slavery. I mean, it's a real thing. That's what's really, really sad.
well,
And
we're seeing it come out right now, and I don't think the timing of the Epstein files being disclosed is coincidence. I don't
Yeah, in
believe
fact,
that's
yeah, Prince
coincidence.
Andrew was just arrested this morning, wasn't he?
Yes, he was, and
Yeah.
now, am I expecting anything really to happen? What I do see is potentially coming out of this a false light coming against this darkness. That's
Mhm,
the occult way. They have the dark and they have the light. They have the
mhm.
black and they have the white on their chessboard. And so again, it's they have a dualism type of battle.
Yeah,
But
you
we don't. We
right,
know who wins. There's not
right.
some cosmic boxing match between Yah and Satan.
Yeah. Well, and this kind of takes us back to Revelation 17, where it says that the beast and the 10 kings will hate the woman and will burn her with fire. And it's kind of, if you guys have heard of the Hegelian dialectic, the Hegelian dialectic is where you have a thesis, then you have an antithesis, and then you have a synthesis, right? So the whole idea is that, let's say I'm the ultimate bad guy, okay, and I create a fire over here, and then I create another fire over here. Let's think Democrats and Republicans. Let's think conservatives and liberals. Let's think, Antifa versus MAGA, whoever you want to pit against one another, at least in the American context. Or we can go back to Nazis versus the communists, right? It's just that you have group A that hates group B hates group A, and then they start fighting each other. And then out of all that chaos, something else emerges.
Comes
And that
order.
was the goal in the first place. And that's why, I'm always trying to encourage people at the Way congregation, you guys who join us every week. Let's be careful to not get into this partisan nonsense because we're all being played, whether you're red or blue. And you can look at the other side and say, oh, they're terrible, they're wrong. And I bet they are. They probably are wrong about a lot of things. But it's when you look in the mirror, because that's the guy you can actually change. You can't change the guy across the street, but the guy in the mirror, you can change that person.
Yeah.
And what Christ has called us to do is to change the man or woman in the mirror, because that's the only person you have any kind of authority over.
Well,
So,
and I've
you know,
my college friends, I love them to death. I mean, I've been friends with them now for years and years and years, for almost 40 years now. But they still have hopium in the Orange Man, and they're like,
mm,
"How can he? What? Nobody on the right wants to go to war with Iran. How can we do this?" I'm like, "Dude, he's a puppet. Okay, he's doing the bidding of his masses. Okay, he is doing the bidding of the people that put him into power." And how else, and again, when we look at this, how else to get the wool across the eyes of the conservatives except to get them excited about this man who's going to change everything and makes all these promises. In the meantime, in his inauguration, which is underneath, it was in the Capitol for a reason, and that wasn't just because of the weather. And here he is with all these technocrats who want to bring in this global surveillance system and want to bring in, Starnet, not Starnet, but
Starlink.
Starlink and
Yeah.
Neuralink and Palantir and all these things about this global surveillance system. And everybody's all like, yes, we need voter ID. What do you think that is ultimately? It's going to be a tracking system.
Yeah.
So, yes, many good things can come from this.
Yeah.
If you had a digital currency and you had digital IDs, then yes, you could use it for good and prevent trafficking and prevent
Hmm.
illegal
Hmm.
drug trafficking. But when your government's been involved in the drug trafficking, I mean, read, they're landing planes in Arkansas. I mean, these
Yeah.
things that people used to be just considered nutcases on, now it's mainstream that your average American is starting to go, oh my goodness.
Divide, deceive, distract, realize, realize, realize. I like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Eyes to see and
exactly.
ears to hear.
Yep, yep. Here's another one. The Board of Peace
Yeah.
will displace the UN. I mean, maybe. Um, we had Maria on some years ago, and she was vocal about her opinions about Donald Trump. And you know,
I miss Maria. I wish she was around. Although
she was great. I still don't personally think he's. I don't think he's the beast.
he
I,
could
I,
fit the
I
little hornbill though.
Well, I think the little horn, the beast, the son of perdition, the man of sin, Antichrist, whatever you want to call them, I think they're all the same title. They're the same, they're the titles, different titles for the same guy. And Gog is also one of those titles. So,
Well,
I think they're
if,
just different aspects of the same individual, the end times individual that's on his way.
if Yeshua returns after 2 days, and let's say that was somewhere between 29ish AD when he departed and 34ish AD, we'll know real quick if Trump is a player
That's right.
being used as a head. I call him a head puppet. I don't think he's a head puppet. I think he's a rung or two below the head puppets. The head puppets would be the people that that really think they run this world. In other words, they're right up under the powers and the principalities, and then they use the useful idiots to implement their what because again, this is all about ultimately forming this one world government, one world religion, coming back, and again, we're seeing it play out. John Haller loves to use the ACLU, acceleration, convergence, logistics. And just everything is coming together sort of at a breakneck speed. Everything is converging. All these, again, I look back in the 70s and I'm like, bless their hearts, they're doing 1970s prophecy news updates. They're looking at Egypt and Israel. They're looking at Kissinger, and this is my dad, by the way.
Yeah.
But again, I think those were building blocks.
Yeah.
Kissinger going over to China and opening up China. I believe China has been the test case for a future one world government. In other words, the social credit score, the monitoring, the ability to control thought, the ability, if you have a thought, you better keep it to yourself.
Right.
If it conflicts with the state.
Yeah.
And so again, you see those building blocks. See, I think 67 was a major building block for prophecy to be fulfilled. Judah had to take control of the land. And so again, all these things, Judah being gathered back in 48. I don't care if the nefarious Rothschilds were involved in the scheme to bring Judah back. God uses these evil people. He uses the queens and the rooks and everything to effectuate his plan.
Yep. Yeah. Amen. Well, we got through 18, guys. We will see you next week. Revelation 19 is going to be crazy amazing. So do join us. Looking forward to it. Oh man, I can hardly wait for 19. It's going to be really cool. Hey, if you could join me this coming Shabbat, I am going through Matthew 27. So right here on my channel, it's going to start at 11:20 Colorado time. So figure that out wherever you are. And love to have you join me. If you're in the Denver area, please do come and join us every Shabbat at the Way Congregation. We're technically in Lakewood. So just look us up, thewaycongregation.com. And I'm pretty excited about all that God is doing. So awesome, guys. Thank you so much. And we will see you next week. Good night.